Arkham Asylum, Serious House, and Serious Earth is one of the weirdest and most unique Batman comics I've ever read. I'm not usually a fan of artsy or weird comics, but Serious House won me over and kept me engaged from the first panel to the last. I don't even know how to begin to articulate what makes this comic work when it really shouldn't, but I'm sure gonna try. And joining me will be my good friend Charles Carty, who will be addressing some of the ways this has influenced the Batman Arkham games and diving into some of the symbolism and how this affected Batman media as a whole. So if that interests you, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and maybe check out Charles Carty. With all the formalities out of the way, let us dive into Batman Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Serious Earth. The comic begins with a young Amadeus Arkham tending to his mentally ill mother who is refusing to eat, stating she already has. Amadeus begins to question her, and he sees beetles fall from her mouth onto the faded bedsheets. We then cut to the present day. Gordon is on the rooftop of the GCPD talking to Batman, something we've seen a million times before. But the tone is more urgent than we're used to. Batman already seems tired and oddly disturbed. Gordon tells the Caped Crusader that Joker has taken over Arkham Asylum, and is asking for Batman. Joker calls the GCPD and Batman answers. After an extremely disturbing exchange where the Clown Prince of Crime tells Batman about a hostage he has next to him and alludes to her eyes being gouged out by a dull pencil, Batman rushes to the asylum while shouting no for the hostage who he believes has just lost her sense of sight because of him. We then get another flashback to Amadeus Arkham, who is now a grown man and has a family. He's staying in Metropolis and is working as a psychiatrist. His current patient is Mad Dog Hawkins, who is a murderer that suffers from a mental illness and was sexually assaulted by his father when he was a child. Mad Dog is known for brutalizing his victims' faces and sexual organs. Amadeus decides to go back to his old mansion and found an institution for the mentally ill. He brings his family, and that night he has a nightmare about being in a house of mirrors where the reflections jump back out at him. And just like that, Arkham Asylum is born. After reaching the asylum, Batman sees that the hostage is unharmed and is fine, if not a little traumatized. He orders her and all the other hostages to be let go. Joker agrees as long as Batman goes into the asylum and into the madhouse. Batman agrees and all the hostages are freed. On his way to the door, Joker gives him a slap on the ass, very similar to the one I gave your mother last night. This version of Joker is oddly sexual. Originally, he was supposed to be wearing black lingerie and fake eyelashes. This was inevitably cut, of course, but it's still interesting that we almost got an extremely different version of this already unconventional Joker. While some might not like the idea of Joker wanting Batman to fuck him in the ass, I actually think this is one of the very few occasions where something like this makes sense. Joker has an unhealthy obsession with Batman, and it's a logical jump to bring that to a sexual plane. It opens the door for some very interesting stories, and I wish more was done with this. Sadly, I do not think we will ever get any thought-provoking stories with this concept, since outside of a few one-dimensional gags, the writers haven't done anything with this since. But moving on, Batman enters the asylum, and the games may begin. The second he enters the madhouse, Batman is met by a doctor who refuses to leave. Joker proceeds to talk to Batman while he assaults one of his henchmen. Our Caped Crusader then sees Two-Face huddled under a table after he just pissed himself. The doctor explains how they are curing Two-Face's broken sense of decision-making by instead of flipping a coin, he chooses a playing card. Batman challenges this with the fact that Two-Face now can't make the decision of going to the bathroom without picking one of the cards. The doctor justifies this with the logic of some things have to be broken for all of it to be fixed. Joker then tells the doctor to do some word association with Batman. The doctor refuses, and Batman has the most based response a man could give. It's just words, doctor. Bruce fully knows where this is going to go and is willing to relive his past trauma just to prevent the slight chance that Joker hurts this doctor. This entire sequence is just masterful and one of my favorites in the entire comic. This is what Batman should be. Even at his most monstrous, he will face his inner demons if it means saving a life. There then is another flashback to Amadeus's lifetime. This vastly consists of an internal monologue where Amadeus talks about his daughter who has been plagued with nightmares. He says all smart children have nightmares and that he blames the bad dreams on the fact that his daughter makes him read Alice in Wonderland over and over again. This is the first of many direct references to Through the Looking Glass this comic holds. But moving on back to the present, Batman and the Doctor have started the word association as Joker eggs him on through it. The Doctor starts with Mother, Pearl. Batman's response: handle, revolver, gun, father, death, end. This book loves its flashbacks, so we get another Amadeus flashback. This time, he receives a phone call saying Mad Dog has escaped. He disregards this and hangs up. Finally, Batman can't take it anymore and says stop. Joker is annoyed his newest game got cut short and tells Batman they'll next play a game of hide and seek. Batman refuses. Joker promptly somehow conjures a police officer out of nowhere and shoots him in the head before moving to the Doctor. Batman gave the Joker one reason to end a life and he took it. This haunts Batman and wears on him for the rest of the book, along with all the other atrocities he's witnessed in the short time in this hellhole thus far. Batman agrees and is told he has 1 hour before they start looking for for him. Joker lets go of the doctor, and just like that, Batman plunges deeper into the madhouse. After wandering through the asylum for only a few minutes, Batman's grip on reality is already weakened. He sees his parents being gunned down. He has to cut himself to snap him back to reality. And during this, Joker and his thugs are watching Psycho, get bored after only 15 minutes, even though they were watching one of the best and most iconic horror movies to ever exist, and decide to start the hunt for Batman, who is now both physically and mentally fatigued. We get another flashback to Amadeus when he was alive. He goes home to find his wife and daughter brutally murdered with their faces and private parts utterly desecrated. This sends Amadeus into a frenzy and opens the floodgates for him to inherit his mother's mental illness, which was hereditary. He then decides to put on his mother's wedding dress and has a complete mental breakdown. This is an extremely well done and extremely grim payoff to something the book has been setting up for. While this deeply unsettles me on every read, I can't help but congratulate Grant Morrison for how well he foreshadowed this through every single flashback, and this is only the end of the first chapter of the story of Amadeus Arkham. He hasn't even opened the asylum yet. But back to the Caped Crusader, he's wandering through the asylum when he meets Clayface, who has a skin disease that makes him appear malnourished and deformed, with his face caving in and changing every time he moves. He tries to spread his disease to Batman, who shrinks away from Clayface, desperately trying to avoid him. In this sequence, less is more. We see Clayface for barely 2 pages, yet I can write multiple paragraphs about this. Clayface apparently has some skin disease he can spread by touch. He's in constant pain, with his one goal being to make others feel the way he feels. The asylum has no precautions in place to stop him from doing this. He doesn't have a protective suit, he's sealed in. He's most likely confined to a room with a very unlucky cellmate, being let out for meals just like the rest of the inmates, taking treatment day by day. I doubt there's much consideration for the doctors. We as the reader have no idea how many people he's infected or how Batman stopped him the first time. Was he born with this or did he acquire it? We know almost nothing, yet it feels like you do. This is some of the best world building I've seen in a Batman comic. While I dislike how the villains show up for 2 pages then dip, I feel this comic pulls it off in the best way it can, and I can't help but appreciate it. Though I wish these characters had more time to shine, because this version of Clayface is extremely interesting, but we never hear from him again. And that's almost 3 paragraphs about a character who appeared for less than 2 pages. Continuing his Star Trek through the asylum, Batman meets an anonymous inmate who needs Clayface to push his wheelchair. Batman scares the living daylights out of who I'm pretty sure is Black Mask and continues moving. Batman then meets Scarecrow, who's brandishing a pitchfork. I love the simplicity of Scarecrow's design here. It doesn't try anything new, yet it's oddly refreshing. Just wanted to praise something in this comic that wasn't fucking depressing. Moving on, Batman then meets Jervis Tetch, the Mad Hatter, who speaks vastly in rhymes, just like countless other times. Okay, I'll stop. Since everything in this comic has to be extremely twisted, this version of Jervis alludes to being a pedophile and admits he finds children extremely fascinating, especially the girls, since they remind him of his Alice. Him being a child predator aside, I really like this version of Jervis. Both him and Scarecrow feel just as they should, while pushing some of the more extreme ideas. This comic has an extreme amount of respect for all Batman's rogue gallery and the billionaire cosplayer himself, and I find it interesting that the comic that stands on the shoulders of what came before ended up being one of the most influential Batman comics of all time. I don't think we would have the Arkham games if this comic didn't exist. But moving on in the book, we then get a flashback of Amadeus treating Mad Dog, the man who murdered and raped his family. Mad Dog taunts Amadeus throughout his treatment, retelling his own acts down to the last minute detail. Finally, Amadeus cracks, and during electroshock therapy, he leaves the chair on as Mad Dog cooks with no remorse for his past actions. While he might have dispatched of his latest demon, he still has one he has to face. Batman then happens upon Maxie Zeus, who is acting out his fetish of his balls being fried in the electric chair. Even Batman is extremely confuzzled on what the fuck is happening here and decides to leave, giving us yet another example of this book showing us character for 2 pages, then promptly forgetting about them. We now get one of the last of our flashbacks as we near the end of the story, as we see Amadeus monologuing about how his mental illness has gotten worse. Batman has been strolling through the asylum for quite a while now, and I ran out of new ways to say that a long time ago. Our Caped Crusader then comes face to face with Killer Croc, who is a towering figure with very few human features. If he was once a man, he is not anymore.
Muddy, please let me do this bit. Come on, it's about Killer Croc. You know how much I love Killer Croc. Just let me do this bit.
Can you do it a different time? Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyway, now back to the book. He charges at Batman. The two fight until Batman is thrown out the window of the asylum. Batman spots a statue and realizes what he has to do. He takes the weapon from the statue as Killer Croc jumps from the same window Batman fell out of to continue the fight. Batman stabs him with the spear right before the crocodile would have landed on him. The spear plunges into Batman's flesh. This version of the vigilante doesn't have bulletproof armor. He's built on the foundation of fear to be more like a myth than a combatant. He's now wounded as he makes his way back into the asylum and finds the doctor being held captive with a knife to her throat. We now get another episode of what disturbing lore drop will Amadeus bestow upon us? I love these flashbacks, but towards the end they really start to mess with the pacing. But this is one of the better flashbacks as we get a total plot twist that Amadeus' mother did not commit suicide. He murdered her during one of her psychotic episodes. We then see Amadeus being admitted to his own asylum, which is quite poetic. The story might seem familiar to you if you've collected the Chronicles of Arkham and the Spirit of Arkham side mission in Batman Arkham Asylum. I feel it is now a good time to mention this comic's influence on the game.
I shouldn't have interrupted you to do the Killer Croc bit, but please let me do the Arkham Asylum game bit. Come on, that's like my thing. That's all I ever talk about.
Sure,
Come on, just let me do this bit,
have fun.
And then I promise I'll leave you alone. Love it or hate it, Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Sirius Earth, has influenced a lot of Batman media outside of itself. It really set into motion the idea of Arkham Asylum being a real character and a place which even Bruce fears to some extent. Like he says in the opening of the book, Batman isn't afraid of anything, it's me. Bruce is genuinely kind of unnerved by Arkham Asylum. It's an iconic location in the Batman mythos, and thanks to the 2009 game Batman Arkham Asylum, it was brought forward to a wider, more mainstream audience, and in turn, so was a whole host of Easter eggs, references, and direct links to Sirius House. The inspirations for the game weren't exactly a hidden side of Arkham Asylum. The game wears its inspirations on its sleeve from both the Sirius House and Living Hell. The atmosphere, the Lovecraftian architecture, and haunted nature of the island, and some lines spoken by one Clown Prince are all pretty clear-cut references, so as the resident Arkham Asylum glazer, let me indulge you in some of the finest Sirius House references from the 2009 masterpiece. The first and most obvious is the line spoken by Joker as he's escorted into the asylum.
Don't be a stranger, you're always welcome here. Gotta say, it's good to be back.
This is a direct reference to one of the most iconic quotes from the book, which is spoken by Mr. J as Batman leaves the asylum, with Joker telling him that if it ever gets too much, there's always a place for him here, drilling home the book's themes of the asylum really being as much of a home for Batman as it is for the people he puts in here. It's a subtle nod and takes place on the opposite end of the timescale as it does in the book, being said right at the start rather than right at the end, but still it's a nice little reference. Heading further into intensive treatment, and we can find the cell of one Maxi Zeus, a character who I think is the epitome of D-list villainy. However, in Sirius House, he's actually creepy as hell, and one of the coolest looking characters in the book, with the illustrator Dave McKean bringing a slight edge to the usual Zeus LARPer, and that edge carries over to the design of this cell. I think it's probably one of the coolest unique cells in the game, and it seriously invokes that same vibe McKean brought to the character. Although Arkham Asylum's map is separated into 3 parts, Arkham West is truly the hotspot of nods to the 1989 story, with the island's botanical gardens and Ground Zero of the Madness Arkham Mansion both being found here. But our first nod to the book actually comes outside of both of those iconic buildings and sees us take a detour to the graveyard. Arkham Asylum's graveyard is horrifying, and the giant headstones really just punctuate this feel, but there's one grave specifically that means a lot here, the grave of the Asylum's founder, Amadeus. Amadeus' death meant a new era for Arkham Asylum, as he was buried under the dirt of the asylum he helped build. But the grave, although pretty cool, isn't quite where this ends. Because if we head into Arkham Mansion, we can find that Amadeus was trapped here long before his death, in his own cell. See, Amadeus would kill the man who murdered his wife and daughter, and eventually fall into a spiral of madness. He'd go completely insane and begin scrawling over the walls, and eventually would die on the grounds of his biggest quote-unquote success, being buried just outside his former family home. And if we head over to the Botanical Gardens, we get the most obvious and brutal reference to a serious house on Sirius Earth, the beheaded statue of Constance Arkham, Amadeus' wife. This resides in the gardens and has a plaque with her name on it. However, this plaque has had Mad Dog, the name of her killer, scrawled on it. Now what's most interesting here is that it's never cleared up whether this statue had been beheaded for over a century and the Mad Dog was simply acting out during his time in the asylum and no one bothered to fix it, or probably more disturbingly, this incident, which saw the Arkham family torn apart in the most gruesome way possible, became some sort of urban myth or campfire story among inmates in the asylum, and they decided to reenact that by committing a cruel act of vandalism on the statue. The final reference is probably the coolest one, and it's the Beatles. Not the Beatles the band, but the Beatles in the asylum. Now, I've done a whole video on the importance of the Beatles in Arkham Asylum, both the game and the book, but to summarise, Beatles can symbolise the cycle of death and rebirth, and the asylum is covered in this Beatles symbolism. In the book, it's Elizabeth Arkham who shows us the first Beatles we connect to the asylum, and as she's finally put out of her suffering by Amadeus, the Beatles become something of a recurring theme. Madness is constantly born in the asylum. Amadeus becomes almost reborn as a delusional madman, and the asylum itself is reborn as some kind of, you could say some kind of, living hell. The point is, the Arkham games follow this cycle of rebirth, with all major characters going through some kind of rebirth. Batman becomes Bruce Wayne in the public eye, Scarecrow escapes the sewers of the asylum and becomes the hardened, darker and more focused version of himself who takes over Gotham. Jason Todd is reborn as the Arkham Knight here, and Quincy Sharp, the warden of the asylum at the time of the game, is completely enamoured by the journals of Amadeus, believing himself to have been possessed by the spirit of the father of the madhouse, being reborn as a complete and utter madman. And what do all of these rebirths have in common? Well, they all happen within the walls of Arkham Asylum. It's a place of horror and of pain, but also a place which breeds madness and new life into old things, for better or for worse. Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Sirius Earth, had a profound impact on Arkham Asylum, the video game. So next time you play it, maybe stop to see all of those little Easter eggs, because some of them might just make you think of this absolute masterpiece of a story. A story which happens to be my outright favourite of all time. I absolutely love it. Not that that matters for this video, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Anyhow, that's all I've got for you today, and I'll now hand you back to Muddy.
Why, thank you for that, Charles, but we now must move on with the comic as we see Amadeus Arkham being locked up in his own asylum and dying. But as you know, the spirit of Amadeus Arkham will always live on. Batman, being glad the voice of Amadeus Arkham is finally vexed from this stylistically illustrated tale of the human psyche, distracts the crazed doctor long enough for the good doctor being held captive to stab him in the neck, really hammering home the point that nobody gets out of this comic book without being broken down to the point of near insanity. We now reach the climax of the book, as Batman, now having brutalized almost every inmate in the asylum, has come back to Joker, wielding an axe from one of the statues. Fuck you, Absolute Batman. Serious House gave Batman an axe first. Batman, doing his best Norse Kratos impression, promptly posts up in front of Joker. Now, what a normal Batman comic would do is have Batman give Joker a colonoscopy with the axe and run out unharmed. This is Sirius House on Sirius Earth, so it does something that has been slowly building throughout the book, due to actually good foreshadowing. And Batman has to drop the axe and give Harvey his coin back. The terms are simple. Batman walks out of there if it lands on heads, Joker takes over the asylum permanently if it lands on tails. A mere 2 panels show more emotion and let you see what Harvey is thinking now that he has his beloved coin back more than any movie has or ever could. You can feel the weight he feels by simply holding the coin in his hand. So much progress. For what? Two-Face might not have been able to function with the cards, but at least he was no longer dealing in black and white. Two-Face is barely in this comic, and yet he goes through more character development than Henry Cavill Superman did throughout the entire Snyderverse. Harvey finally decides to flip the coin. He catches it. It's heads. Batman walks out of the asylum, finally being exposed to the sunlight after a long night, his silhouette contrasting perfectly against the morning sun. He steps through the cursed doors, and Joker makes sure to tell him that he is always welcome home, back into the madhouse. Our final moment with this glorious one-shot of a comic is Harvey looking out into the world through the muddied and tinted windows of the asylum. Not that it makes much of a difference. Gotham is still Gotham. Before Harvey turns away, he drops his coin and walks off. This comic is a masterful demonstration of how comics can go beyond campy and mindless adventures to actually be a beautifully nuanced piece of art. This book was released in 1989, which is the same year as Tim Burton's Batman was released. While I have many issues with Batman at 89, I don't think Batman would be as prominent as he is today without it. Both this comic and Batman 89 are massive components in how Batman went from a campy detective with his dense ward to one of the most nuanced and complex characters in the comic industry. While this comic goes too far to becoming grimdark for me to say it's my favorite Batman story, I respect the hell out of it and completely understand why it has stood the test of time the way it has. This comic feels like a lucid nightmare with artwork where there's controlled chaos around every turn. Every panel seems angry and miserable, with the characters that are even more so. This comic has very little hope in it, yet it divides itself from the other needlessly dark renditions by not insulting the viewer and talking down to lighter adaptations. Unlike the Snyderverse, Batman has no Robin, Oracle, or Alfred to help him. He is completely and utterly isolated, which Batman is less used to than you'd think. He might act like a cold loner detective, but he always has Alfred or Gordon and he knows it. But in this comic, he doesn't have any of that. He doesn't have anybody sane enough to keep him grounded. Even at the most isolated, Batman always has the city of Gotham and its people to keep him company. But here in the asylum, there's nothing to latch on to. Yet it's the only place that truly accepts Batman, because at the end of the day, he's just as insane as everybody else is. He is simply the only one that chooses to do good. That night in the alley, something in Bruce shattered. An 8-year-old boy watching his parents get murdered, then 15 years later dressing up as Bat to beat up the petty criminals of the city, is not the sign of a sane man, but a broken one. Bruce needs to satisfy his conscience by striking fear into the criminals of Gotham and protecting its citizens, but he's incapable of killing, even if he wanted to. And Joker knows this, which is what makes their interaction so compelling in this book. Joker is absolutely ruthless here, going as far as to sexually assault Batman, knowing perfectly well he'll get nothing more than a broken jaw at worst. And that's what makes this entire book work. It's not about Batman. It's not about Amadeus Arkham. It's not even about the asylum. It's about the human mind and what happens when people stare into the void and only one refuses to blink. I don't think there's enough words in the English language to describe how much this comic does and how well it does it. This is truly a special story, and while it's extremely dark, it is definitely worth a read no matter who you are. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, and if you're on mobile, hype the video. Special thanks to my good friend Charles Carty. I've been Money Tacoma, and as always, I hope you all have a super day, and I will see y'all later. Peace out.